these are things that I've picked up really. So if any of you guys are working in the player development through age groups, or if you've got jobs working in phases, these are some of the things that I think are really, really important. And these are the things that we abide by, I suppose, in Wales. So first of all, we're very clear in the player attributes that we've got. Now, we're very lucky in Wales that we've got a pathway where the first team staff and the first team manager, since I've been involved with Wales, have been very, very interested and very invested in what goes on at the lower levels with the 15, 16, 17s. So it's very easy then to link it from expectation at first team level, what that left back looks like, what that centre back looks like, what that centre midfielder looks like, what the wide players look like. We've got really good modelling from the first team, which comes from obviously the first team staff and what's expected and the players we've got at that level. So we can use that to really benchmark against what's important at the lower level, at the lower age groups. And then that links to your talent ID. So if we're looking for certain types of players that we think are going to come through and play international football, then we can benchmark against certain attributes from the first team. So started with Gary Speed, was very, very invested. We actually worked with the under-16s with Ocean Roberts, who was our previous technical director. Then worked through Chris Coleman, or Chris Coleman would be in and around the 15, 16s, watching them, making sure that, they had the right outlook, the right attitude to be players to play for Wales. And Ryan Giggs has been exactly the same. And Rob Page, who works with him in the first team, very, very invested. Rob's actually the link from the youth groups to the first team. So although he works with the first team at Ryan, he works across both and links those phases. So really important to have. Ryan, when we played the Victory Shield a couple of years ago, the last one you saw there on the video at the beginning, Ryan was at 2 of the games, wanted to speak to the players after the games, came in and spoke to some of the players at halftime. Didn't take over, but just wanted to be around it to make sure that the players understand that, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And the pathway in Wales can be quite fast for players if it's felt that they're ready. So really important to have that talent ID and recruitment link right through the age groups. We work on a principal play basis. So it doesn't really matter what formation we play. We're not fixed on formations. I don't think we can be in international football, because it may be that my 2005 group have 3 excellent centre backs. So I need to give them as much exposure as possible playing international football. So I need to play them. So I'll play with a back 3, just to make sure I give them as much as I can. Or if we've got 3 number 10s in a different age group, and they're outstanding and we've got high hopes for them, then we'll find a way to play them. So we may play with 3 number 10s. So our formation can change, but the principles that sit around that formation will never change. So we work on 4 simple principles. We work on breaking lines. We work on switching play. We work on creating, exploiting overloads, and we work on the final third. And that's in attack and in defense, and then everything in transition. And I'll show you a little bit about what I mean in terms of that when I go through the game model. So obviously breaking lines, playing the ball forward, that can be a short pass, it can be a longer pass, it can be taking all the lines out with one pass. It just depends on what's the right pass at that time. So we work on decision making in terms of what those passes look like. Switching players in every game you ever watch. So the right back or the right wing has got it, and it's blocked up. You can't go down there. You've got to find a way to go and find space on the other side of the pitch, and the best way to do that and the right ways to do that. So we coach a lot of switching play, and then create and exploit overloads. That can be anything from a 2v1 in a wide area to build up. If you've got a back 4 against a front 3, how you find the spare player, how you create overloads centrally in midfield. Regardless of the shape you're playing, there'll be a way to create overloads somewhere to try and exploit and find a spare player. And then the final third should speak for itself, really. Looking at combination in the final third, crossing, the final pass, timing the runs in behind, making sure there's width in the final third, making sure the finishes are good, everything that sits around the final third. And then on the flip side, defensively, don't let teams play through. So we're very narrow, compact. Don't let teams break lines. Send them into wide areas, get across and stop switches of play. So let's make sure we defend properly in wide areas. If they beat us and they go down the sides, then make sure we stop crosses, defend the box properly, transition properly. So principles of the game, none of that will matter in terms of those principles, regardless of what shape you play. It'll always be the same. Narrow, compact, send into wide areas, try and create traps, defend the box properly. And then obviously defending the box properly is important in terms of, the final third, defend the final third, make sure you stay with runners, make sure you You know, you've got your open body shape, protecting the space behind, you know, making sure that the distance between the goalkeeper and the back four is always maintained, things like that, you know. So again, if you play with a back three or a back four, you're going to have the back line and you're going to have the goalkeeper. So the distance between the back three or the back four and the goalkeeper has to be maintained and has to be good. And you have to make sure you control that area as best you can. So again, you know, it's a principle as opposed to anything to do with the shape. So really important that. I talked a little bit about the clarity in the pathway. I think it's really important that the players at the 15s, 16s, 17s can see what the 18s and 19s are doing, what the 21s and what the first team are doing. So, and they can see the pathway, and I'll show you some modeling that we do around that in a little while. And the modeling is evidence-based for everything we do. If it's individual modeling, if it's shape modeling, if it's principle modeling, if it's managing a game, anything we do in terms of modeling, it's always done on evidence. So it comes down from the first team again through the 21s into the 19s, 17s. And sometimes we'll model with the first team, but sometimes with the 15s, I'll use the 16s to model because it's a lot closer. So we do a lot of that. And obviously in training as well, we're lucky to have a lot of the first team footage in terms of how they train and what they do, some of the sessions they do, and obviously the quality that's in there. So we use modeling from that perspective as well, so that when we do sessions that are similar, we can show the players what's expected. We always talked to the players about what can be controlled from their perspective. So we always talk to them about us as a staff will provide a great environment for them to come into. So my staff are always fantastic, you know, whether it's coaches, medical staff, safeguarding staff, you know, goalkeeper coaches, analysis, you know, team operations, everything that sits around the players will be excellent, and they work very hard, you know. So we'll provide a good environment for players to come into, but when they come into it, they've got to bring their part to it too. So if it's time to rest, if it's time to, you know, to eat, if it's time to sleep, if it's time to reflect on games, if it's a unit meeting, if it's an individual meeting, if it's something to do with the team, they've got to come and they've got to be fully engaged in that, so that they can learn. And it could be learning from good things, and it could be learning from mistakes. I don't care. They're young players, so they have to make sure that they're fully engaged in the process. When they train, they give everything. And when they reflect, rest, all of that, they have to give everything because they can control that. And it's interesting. We always ask players at the beginning of camps, you know, especially if there's a game involved in that camp, you know, what do we want to do? And a lot of them will always come up with win. Well, I think that's just a given. You know, I don't think anybody goes into a football match not wanting to win. I think, you know, you want to win. You know, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, you're going to draw some, but you can control the process. A lot of the time, you can't control the outcome. You may be up against a team that's just too good on the day, you know. You may not play that well on the day, so you've got to try and control the processes. So buying into process, buying into what they can control in terms of their work rate, you know, their game understanding, how they're trying to apply themselves, how they ask questions, all of those things that they can control is really important to us. And then, you know, if you're in player development, then you're never in it for tomorrow. You know, I always think if you're working in player development, you're working in it for 5 years' time, for 10 years' time. You know, if I'm working with 12, 13-year-olds, the chance they're not going to play for first teams regularly until they're, you know, 20, 21, 22, maybe, you know, some are earlier. But, you know, you're working with what you're doing now for their progression for 10 years' time, really, when they get first team experience and they can play in the first team. So everything I'm doing now with the 15, 16, 17s, it's not for now, it's for the first team. Yes, it's an important part of the journey, but still, it's you know, it's not so much for now. It's more for when they go down that first team route and they're playing first team football. So really important kind of areas, I think, within player development. This is our pathway, just quickly. The grassroots. So the boys' pathway for us is the grassroots clubs. We have Welsh licensed academies. So we have the Welsh Premier League, the Cymru Premier League, we call it. And within that, you know, they've all got academies. So we've got that route for players. And then obviously the professional teams, we've got four in Wales, which are obviously Cardiff, Swansea, Newport and Wrexham. But then obviously we've got all the clubs in England where we have Welsh eligible players. So we have the professional academies. Then we have what we call we have Cymru League's regional squads. So they come in alongside our professional academy regional squads of 13 and 14. Then it's the national youth teams, and then it's the first team. And then we have a girls' pathway as well, which is grassroots clubs into what we now call development centres. They're not performance centres anymore, with development centres. Then we have our regional squads in the north and south, who are now in full time with us. So they play in the boys Cymru League's academy games program, and then our national youth teams, 15s to 19s, in the first team. So just simple pathways that we have in Wales to hopefully, you know, bring a bit of clarity to the public. So this is where hopefully we align our game model, our playing philosophy, our player development program with the grassroots and the coach education. Now, we very much see player development as the driving force behind everything we do. So, and then that has to have a knock-on effect to coach education, because if we have a player development philosophy in Wales and a way of doing things and principles that we want to live by, then there's no point in the coach education department not teaching the coaches how to coach within that games pro or within that game model or within those principles. So our coach education program is fully underpins everything that goes on in player development in the grassroots games. So obviously at every different level. So that's really important. Coach education has to be, you know, completely aligned with player development, because football changes. You've seen over the last, you know, 10, 15, 20. I was speaking to somebody the other day and they were saying, you know, when I was a player, when I was playing as a professional, we never had pressing. Nobody ever pressed. But that's because a lot of the time, you know, football, you know, maybe through the 80s, 90s or whatever it was, there was less playing out from the back. You know, so, but now everybody's trying to build from the back, you know, building even within their own 6-yard box. So obviously pressing now is gonna come into it. So football changes. So, and that's just one example, you know, the goal, you know, the rules for goal kicks are changing all the time. The rules for the goalkeepers have changed over the years. You know, years ago, you could pass it back to the keeper, he could pick it up. That changes. So the development of the game will always then have to be underpinned by coach education, and coach education has to come with it. So that's really important. And we're very good at that in Wales. I think that's one of the best parts of our coach education program, is that it's real and it's current. And that's why a lot of good pros come into the program to do coach education in Wales. And then we have, I'm not sure if you can see this, our game model. So what you'll notice in the game model is there'll be nothing in there which is specific to any shape. Okay, so all of that, regardless of what shape you're playing in, is very, very important every time we take the field. So confidence to take the ball, decision making through, round and over, moving the ball quickly, finding spare players, creating, exploiting opportunities. So that's what we want to do in possession, regardless of the shape. Yes, there'll be detail that sits underneath this, which will relate to whatever shape we're playing at the time. But still, it doesn't matter what shape you're playing. That's important. Out to possession, show away from goal, block central passes, stop switches, protect the space between lines, control the space behind the back line. They are general principles that I'm always looking for every time our team takes the field. And then obviously the two really important parts of transition. So anticipation first, in possession, secure the first pass, play forward early if you can, support quickly, move into the attacking shape. Usually it takes 4, 5, 6 seconds to get into attacking shape once you've been defending, or maybe 4, 5, 6 passes, depending on the speed of the passes. So if you can't go forward early and counter attack, then you need those 4, 5 passes or seconds to be in your attacking shape. You're in good space. The opposition have retreated into defensive shape, and then you're playing your philosophy, I suppose. And then your defensive transition, then, you know, again, anticipate, fast pressure on the ball, stop forward passes, force away from goal, recover quickly. So those things are all in the game model all of the time, regardless of shape, regardless of who we're playing. We want to try and work to those principles of the game within our game model. So that's a little bit around that. Modeling, massively important for us. So being able to link that game model all the way from the first team down to the regional and international youth teams. So really important that you understand that all of the game model that sits within our national syllabus, our first team staff were heavily involved in this. In those statements, I suppose, that sit inside the game model. So, and obviously our 21 staff, 19 staff, 18 staff, everybody had a say in this. So it is hopefully quite a well-rounded example of what we want to do. Excuse me. So linking that game model all the way from the top is really important. And then every session we do with players, regardless of age, especially if it's a new session or a new practice and they haven't seen it before, we frame that session. So the players will come into the room, into a meeting room, and we'll go through the session on a on Global Coach. I'll show you Global Coach in a sec. And I thought the bang upstairs, I thought my ceiling was going to come through there. Sorry. So they need to understand, and we do that. Sometimes we link it to clips, which are game model clips. Sometimes we link it to other training sessions. So, but we always show the session that we're going to do, because we need the players to understand why they're doing it. I don't like doing things that I don't understand why I'm doing them. So it's important that the players, before they take the field, understand how that session and how the practices we're going to do in that training session link to the bigger picture. So that's really important. And that could be for individuals, for relationships within teams. So 2 centre-backs, 3 centre-backs, wide players, strikers, combining midfield players, relationships within the team. Could be to units, back fours, back threes, midfield units, front units, wide units, whatever that is, or the team. So really important the players understand why we're doing what we're doing, and we always frame, and I'll give an example of framing in a bit. And then, obviously it gives belief in the pathway, because it sees the younger players see the older players doing the same things. So hopefully that's then strengthens buy-in, so that so then when we're talking to them about the game, when we're talking to them about sessions, about games, reflecting on things, they've got a clear idea really of what's important and how we want to do things. So that's really important, the modeling that we do.